A young waitress is on her knees in the middle of a crowded diner, cradling her sick German Shepherd puppy when three rich kids tower over her. The leader doesn't ask questions. He doesn't care about the whimpering animal struggling to breathe. He just kicks hard. His two friends laugh and join in like it's some kind of game. They think their parents' money makes them invincible. But they made one fatal mistake. The man sitting at the counter behind them wasn't just another customer quietly drinking his coffee. He was Delta Force, and what he was about to do would bring an entire empire of corruption crashing down. Before we begin, tell us wherever in the world you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more. The morning shift at Ruby's Diner in Crescent Bay, California, was supposed to be quiet. It was a Tuesday in late September. The kind of day where the biggest drama is usually someone complaining their toast is too dark or their bacon isn't crispy enough. Emma Torres had been working there for 3 years, saving every single dollar she could while taking night classes at the community college. She was 23, with dark hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that still held hope despite working double shifts 6 days a week. She had dreams, big ones, dreams of veterinary school, dreams of opening her own practice someday, dreams of a life beyond grease-stained uniforms and $2 tips from tourists passing through. But this morning, those dreams felt impossibly far away. Because tucked in a small carrier under the break room table was Scout, her 8-week-old German Shepherd puppy. He'd been sick for 2 days now, vomiting, trembling, refusing to eat. She'd spent her last $200 at the emergency vet clinic the night before, money she'd been saving for textbooks. They said he had parvovirus. They said he needed to stay hydrated and monitored constantly. They said it could go either way. Emma couldn't afford to stay home. She couldn't afford to lose this job, so she brought him with her, hidden in that carrier, hoping her manager wouldn't notice, hoping she could check on him between orders, hoping he'd make it through the day. At the counter, nursing his 3rd cup of black coffee, sat a man who looked like he belonged anywhere but a small-town diner. His name was Marcus Webb, 38 years old, broad shoulders that stretched the seams of his plain grey hoodie, hands that were calloused and scarred in ways that told stories he'd never speak aloud, a face that was handsome in a weathered, hard-lived kind of way, with eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. He had the kind of stillness that made people unconsciously give him space, the kind of quiet that came from 20 years of operating in places where a single sound could get you killed. Marcus Webb was Delta Force. 4 combat deployments he could talk about, and a dozen more black operations he couldn't. He'd retired 6 months ago with a chest full of medals locked in a storage unit he never visited, and memories that woke him up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat. He'd come to Crescent Bay because it was small, quiet, and far enough from his old life that no one asked questions. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just looking for decent coffee and a place where no one knew his name or what he'd done in the dark corners of the world. But trouble, as Marcus had learned over 2 decades of warfare, has a way of finding men like him, and on this ordinary Tuesday morning, trouble was about to walk through the door of Ruby's Diner in the form of 3 young men who'd never been told no in their entire privileged lives. The bell above the door of Ruby's Diner chimed at exactly 11:47 a.m. It was the kind of sound that usually meant nothing, just another customer, just another order, just another Tuesday morning sliding into afternoon in Crescent Bay, California. But Emma Torres, who was refilling the ketchup bottles at table 6, felt something shift in the air the moment those 3 young men walked through that door. You know that feeling? When your gut tells you something's wrong before your brain catches up. When every instinct you've developed from years of dealing with difficult customers suddenly screams at you to be careful. That's what Emma felt as she looked up and saw them. 3 of them, all in their early 20s, all wearing clothes that cost more than her monthly rent. The one in front was tall, maybe 6'1", with perfectly styled dark hair that had that expensive, messy look that actually takes an hour and $200 worth of product to achieve. He wore a black designer polo shirt with a little logo Emma didn't recognize but knew was expensive, dark jeans that probably cost $400, and shoes that gleamed like they'd never touched actual pavement. This was Brandon Hartwell, not that Emma knew his name yet. But she'd seen his type before. The kind of guy who'd never worked a real day in his life but walked around like he owned the world, because in Crescent Bay, his father pretty much did. Behind Brandon came two more. The one on his left was stockier, built like he played football in high school and was trying to hold on to that glory. Tyler Vance. He had blonde hair buzzed short on the sides and wore a vintage band t-shirt that Emma recognized from a boutique downtown where a single shirt cost $90. The irony of rich kids wearing working-class nostalgia as fashion wasn't lost on her. The third was Lena, Asian, with wire-rimmed glasses that probably cost more than Emma's laptop. Josh Chen. He was already on his phone, scrolling with the bored expression of someone who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. They didn't wait to be seated. They just walked straight to the best booth in the place, the big corner one with the window view of Main Street, and slid in like they owned it, which, technically, Brandon's father did. He owned the building. He owned half the block. Emma took a breath, grabbed her order pad, and walked over. "Good morning, guys. Welcome to Ruby's. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Brandon didn't look up from his phone. "Coffee. Black. Fresh pot. The stuff you've got sitting there smells like it's been there since yesterday." Tyler laughed. "Dude, it probably has been." "Sweet tea," Josh said, not looking up either. "Real sugar, not that fake garbage. And make sure the glass is actually clean this time." Emma felt her jaw tighten. This time, they'd never been here before. She'd remember them, but she forced a smile. "No problem. I'll be right back with those." She turned to walk away when Brandon's voice cut through the diner. "Hey, wait." She turned back. "Yes? Are you new here? You look new." "I've been here 3 years." "Huh." Brandon finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Emma felt herself being assessed like a car he was considering buying. 3 years and still serving coffee. That's sad. "You go to college or are you just a lifer?" Tyler snorted into his hand. Emma's smile became plastic. "I'm in night classes. Can I get you anything else?" "Night classes," Brandon repeated, like the words were amusing. "Let me guess. Community college? Is there anything else I can get you?" Emma repeated, her voice flat now. "Yeah," Brandon said, leaning back in the booth with a smirk. "Some actual service. We're in a hurry. Think you can handle that with your community college brain?" At the counter, Marcus Webb had been reading the local newspaper, or at least pretending to. He'd actually been listening to the entire exchange. His coffee cup was halfway to his lips when he heard the way Brandon spoke to her, and something in his posture shifted. Not obviously. Marcus Webb didn't do obvious, but his shoulders set a little differently. His eyes, which had been casually scanning the diner, now tracked the 3 young men with the kind of attention a wolf gives to potential prey. He'd seen their type before, in different countries, different contexts. The sons of warlords in Afghanistan who thought their father's money and guns made them untouchable. The cartel princes in Colombia who'd torture someone for fun and call it Tuesday. The only difference was the expensive clothes and American accents. The core rot was the same. Emma walked back to the counter, her hands shaking slightly as she poured fresh coffee. Marcus watched her take a breath, steady herself, and walk back to their table. "Here's your coffee and tea," she said, setting them down carefully. Brandon took a sip of the coffee and immediately made a face. "This is disgusting. Did you even brew this?" "I just brewed it fresh, sir." "Don't call me sir. I'm not 50. He pushed the cup toward her. "Make it again." Emma's patience, already thin from a morning of worry about Scout, was fraying. "I just made it." "It's fresh." "Are you arguing with me?" Brandon's voice got louder. The diner, which had been filled with the pleasant murmur of conversation, started to go quiet. People were watching now. "No, I'm just explaining. I don't care about your explanations. I care about getting coffee that doesn't taste like dishwater. Now are you going to fix it, or do I need to talk to your manager? Tyler was recording on his phone now, grinning. Dude, this is gold. Emma felt heat rising in her cheeks. She wanted to tell him exactly where he could put his coffee. She wanted to dump the whole pot in his lap, but she needed this job. She had student loans and rent, and a puppy who needed expensive medicine. So she swallowed every word she wanted to say and smiled. I'll make you a new pot. That's what I thought, Brandon said, his smirk returning. For the next 20 minutes, Emma endured them. They sent back their food 3 times. The eggs were too runny, then too hard, then not seasoned enough. Tyler's burger was too rare, even though he'd ordered it medium rare. Josh's fries were cold, even though they were steaming. They were loud, talking about their spring break plans in Cabo, about Tyler's new BMW, about some party where they'd trashed a hotel room and Tyler's dad had made the charges disappear. And through it all, Marcus Webb sat at his counter, listening to everything, his trained mind cataloguing details, names, connections, the casual way they discussed Tyler's father making charges disappear. That meant the DA's office. The way Brandon mentioned his dad closing another deal this week. Real estate. The way Josh talked about construction permits being fast-tracked. That whole family ran the biggest construction company in the county. These weren't just spoiled rich kids. They were the sons of the power structure in this town, and they'd clearly never faced a consequence in their entire lives. That's when Marcus heard it. A sound that didn't belong in a diner. A high-pitched whimpering coming from somewhere in the back. Animal distress. Marcus's head tilted slightly, tracking the sound. It was coming from behind the swinging door to the kitchen area. Emma heard it too. She was refilling water glasses at table 4 when the whimper cut through her consciousness like a knife. Scout. She froze, the water pitcher tilting in her hand, water sloshing dangerously close to the rim. The whimper came again, louder, more desperate. Emma's heart dropped into her stomach. She knew that sound. That was the sound Scout made when he couldn't breathe right, when his fever spiked, when the virus was winning. "Excuse me," she said to the customer at table 4, her voice suddenly shaky. She set the pitcher down and turned toward the kitchen. "Hey!" Brandon's voice cut across the diner. "We need more ketchup over here. Like, now." Emma stopped, torn. Scout whimpered again, and this time it was followed by a sound that made her blood run cold. A kind of choking, gasping noise. "Did you hear me?" Brandon called out, snapping his fingers. Actually snapping his fingers like she was a dog. Emma made her decision. Scout was dying. The ketchup could wait. She pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen, past Carl, who was working the grill, and into the small break room. The carrier was on the floor under the table where she'd left it. She dropped to her knees and unlatched it with shaking hands. Scout was convulsing. His little body was rigid, his legs sticking out straight. His eyes rolled back in his head. Foam was coming from his mouth. He was burning up, his fur hot to the touch. "No, no, no," Emma whispered, pulling him out of the carrier and cradling him against her chest. "Scout, please, please, baby, stay with me." She'd read about this. Parvo seizures. If she didn't cool him down right now, his brain would cook. He would die in her arms. She stood up, Scout clutched against her chest, and rushed to the small sink in the break room. She grabbed the hand towels hanging on the rack and soaked them in cold water. But it wasn't enough. She needed ice. She needed space. She needed light to see what she was doing. She pushed back through the swinging door into the main diner, Scout convulsing in her arms. The conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at her. Emma didn't care. She went straight to the drink station where the ice machine was, where there was counter space and light. She laid Scout down on a clean towel and grabbed a handful of ice, wrapping it in another towel and pressing it against his little body. "Come on, Scout," she whispered, tears streaming down her face now. "Come on, baby. Breathe. Just breathe." She didn't see the stairs. She didn't hear Carl coming out of the kitchen, his face already forming the angry question. She didn't notice Marcus Webb turning completely around on his stool, his full attention now on her and the dying puppy. All she saw was Scout. His convulsions were slowing, which could be good or could mean he was fading. She used more ice water, cooling his head, his belly, his paws. She whispered to him, nonsense words, prayers, promises she couldn't keep. "Please don't leave me," she whispered. "You're all I've got. Please." Scout's body relaxed. For a terrible moment, Emma thought she'd lost him. Then he took a shuddering breath, then another. His eyes, still glazed with fever, found hers. "That's it," Emma sobbed. "That's my boy. Stay with me." She was kneeling on the black and white checkered floor of Ruby's diner, her uniform soaked with ice water and tears, cradling an 8-week-old German Shepherd puppy who was fighting for his life, completely unaware that she was about to become the target of something cruel. "Are you kidding me right now?" Brandon Hartwell's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Emma looked up to see all three of them standing over her. Brandon in front, Tyler and Josh flanking him like a pack. "I asked you for ketchup 10 minutes ago," Brandon said, his voice dripping with contempt. "And you're playing with a dog?" "He's sick," Emma said, her voice breaking. "He's really sick. Please, I just need 2 minutes." "I don't care if he's dead," Brandon sneered. "That's not my problem. Your problem is doing your job. Now get up and get back to work." Emma looked down at Scout, then back up at Brandon. "Please. He's just a puppy. He's dying. I just need—" "What you need," Brandon said, stepping closer, "is to remember your place. You're a waitress, a nobody. And that thing in your lap is a mangy mutt that probably has fleas. Now I'm going to count to 3, and if you're not on your feet getting me my ketchup—" "Brandon, man. Look at this," Tyler said, his phone out, recording. "This is hilarious. She's crying over a dog." Josh laughed. "Dude, it's probably going to die anyway. It looks half dead already." Something broke in Emma's face. Not anger. Something deeper. A kind of despair that comes when you realize that some people are just fundamentally cruel, and there's nothing you can do about it. "Please," she whispered one more time. "Please just let me." Brandon kicked. It wasn't a little kick. It wasn't accidental. It was a full, deliberate kick, aimed right at Scout's small, vulnerable body. The sound the puppy made was something Emma would hear in her nightmares for the rest of her life. A sharp, high-pitched yelp of pure pain. Scout's body jerked in her arms, and Emma screamed, a raw sound of horror and rage. "Stop!" she cried, curling her body around Scout, trying to shield him. "Stop, please!" But Tyler was already moving, laughing as he aimed a kick at Emma's back. His expensive sneaker connected with her shoulder blade, and pain exploded through her. She hunched forward, making herself as small as possible, trying to cover Scout completely with her body. "Come on, get the mutt," Josh said, his voice giddy with amusement, like this was the most fun he'd had all day. He kicked at Emma's leg, trying to get her to move, to expose the puppy. The diner had gone completely silent. 23 people were in that diner. 23 people watching as 3 grown men kicked a young woman who was trying to protect a dying puppy. And not one of them moved, except one. Marcus Webb set his coffee cup down on the counter with a deliberate, careful motion. The kind of motion that comes right before violence. He stood up slowly, his 6'2" frame unfolding from the counter stool, and for just a moment, the muscle memory of 2 decades of combat operations flooded through him. He'd killed men for less than this. He'd called in airstrikes on compounds for less than this. He'd spent 20 years of his life hunting down people who hurt the innocent, and here, in a small-town diner in California, he'd just watched 3 spoiled children do exactly that. Marcus walked toward them. Not fast, not running, just walking with the kind of calm, measured steps that predators use when they know their prey isn't going anywhere. Brandon was winding up for another kick when a voice stopped him cold. That's enough. It wasn't loud. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't need to. There was something in those 2 words that made every person in the diner freeze. A quality of absolute authority. The voice of someone who'd given orders in life and death situations and expected them to be followed. Brandon spun around, ready to unload on whoever was interrupting his fun. His mouth was already forming the words, some dismissive insult about minding your own business. Then he saw Marcus Webb, and something in his bravado flickered. Marcus stood 6 feet away, his hands hanging loose at his sides, his posture relaxed. But there was nothing relaxed about his eyes. They were the coldest thing Brandon Hartwell had ever seen. Flat, dead, the eyes of someone evaluating exactly how much force would be required to end a threat. "This doesn't concern you, old man," Brandon said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Walk away." Marcus didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at him with those Arctic eyes. Tyler stepped up beside Brandon, his phone still recording. "Dude, you better back off. Do you know who we are?" "I know exactly what you are," Marcus said quietly. His voice was almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You're 3 cowards who just kicked a woman and a dying puppy because you've never faced a real consequence in your entire worthless lives." Josh laughed nervously. "Man, you need to chill. We were just messing around." "You just assaulted someone," Marcus said, cutting him off, "in front of 20 witnesses, while being recorded." He nodded at Tyler's phone. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to step away from her. You're going to sit back down in your booth, and you're going to wait right there until the police arrive." Brandon's face flushed red. "The police? You're going to call the cops on us?" He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Do you have any idea who my father is?" "I know exactly who your father is," Marcus said. "Richard Hartwell. Owns about 40% of the commercial real estate in this county. Big man. Lots of money. Lots of connections." Marcus took 1 step closer, just one. But it changed everything. Suddenly, he was in their space, and all 3 of them felt it. "Here's what you don't know. I don't care." The way he said it, the absolute flat certainty in his voice, it was like a door slamming shut on every defense they'd ever used. "You just made the biggest mistake of your very short, very privileged lives," Marcus continued, his voice never rising above that conversational tone. "Because I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did here today. Your father, the police, the newspapers, every college you ever applied to, every girl you ever want to date. Everyone is going to know that Brandon Hartwell and his friends beat up a waitress and kicked a dying puppy because they couldn't get their ketchup fast enough." Brandon's face went from red to white. "You can't." "I already did," Marcus said. He held up his phone. "I've been recording since you walked in, got every word, every kick, all of it." Behind them, on the floor, Emma was still curled around Scout, her body shaking with silent sobs. She couldn't see Marcus's face, couldn't see the way he positioned himself between her and them like a wall made of flesh and controlled fury. But she could hear his voice. And for the first time since Brandon walked through that door, she felt something other than terror. She felt hope. Tyler's confidence cracked first. "Brandon, man, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Brandon hissed. He was staring at Marcus, trying to find the angle, trying to find the leverage that had always worked before. "Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Marcus said. "You committed assault and battery. On camera, with witnesses. In a few minutes, the police are going to walk through that door, and you're going to face the consequences of your actions. For what I'm guessing is the first time in your life." That's when Carl, the manager, finally appeared, pushing through from the kitchen, his face already arranged in an expression of concern. But Marcus saw the way his eyes went to Brandon first, saw the way his concern was directed at the wrong people, and Marcus knew, with the cold certainty that came from years of reading situations in hostile territory, that this was about to get worse before it got better. But he was wrong about one thing. It wasn't going to take a few minutes for the police to arrive. Because Carl wasn't reaching for his phone to call them. He was reaching for it to call Richard Hartwell. Carl moved through the gathering crowd of onlookers like a man walking to his own execution. His face had gone from red to pale, sweat beading on his upper lip despite the air conditioning. He was 53 years old, had managed Ruby's Diner for 17 years, and in all that time, he'd learned one fundamental rule of survival in Crescent Bay: you don't cross the Hartwell family. He saw Emma on the floor, saw the way she was cradled protectively around that puppy, saw the wet streaks on her face. He saw the 3 young men standing over her, saw Tyler still holding his phone up like this was all some kind of joke, and he saw Marcus Webb, this stranger who'd been coming in for coffee every morning for the past 2 weeks, standing between them like some kind of self-appointed guardian angel. Carl knew what the right thing to do was. He'd known it the moment he heard the commotion. Call the police, defend his employee, throw these punks out and ban them for life. But Carl also knew that Richard Hartwell owned this building, owned the whole block, and Richard Hartwell's son was standing in his diner, and if Carl made the wrong choice right now, Ruby's Diner wouldn't make it to Christmas. "All right, everyone, let's just calm down," Carl said, his voice trying for authoritative, but landing somewhere around desperate. "Let's not make this into something it doesn't need to be." Marcus turned his head slowly to look at Carl. Didn't move his body, didn't shift his stance, just turned his head, and Carl felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. "Your employee was just assaulted," Marcus said, his voice flat and factual. "By 3 men, in front of 20 witnesses. What part of that doesn't need to be something?" Carl's eyes darted to Brandon, then back to Marcus. "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." "There's video," Marcus interrupted. "No misunderstanding, just assault." Brandon finally found his voice again, and with it, his armor, the thing that had protected him his entire life. "Carl, this woman brought an animal into your restaurant. A sick animal. That's a health code violation. We were just trying to help you maintain standards." Tyler nodded eagerly. "Yeah, man, we were doing you a favor. That thing probably has diseases." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. To anyone else, he looked completely calm, but people who'd served with him in Delta Force would have recognized that tiny shift. That was the moment Marcus Webb decided someone was going to pay. "So, your defense," Marcus said slowly, "is that you kicked a woman and a puppy to enforce health codes. That's the story you're going with." "I didn't kick anyone," Brandon said quickly. Too quickly. "I was trying to move the dog out of the walkway, for safety. If she got hurt, that's because she was in the way." Emma's head snapped up at that, her eyes red and swollen but burning with sudden fury. "You're lying. You kicked him on purpose. You laughed while you did it." "That's your version," Brandon shot back. "But you're emotionally unstable right now. Everyone can see that. You brought a sick animal into a restaurant full of people. That's crazy behavior." And there it was. The pivot. Marcus had seen it 1,000 times. When rich kids couldn't deny what they'd done, they attacked the credibility of the victim. Make her seem unbalanced. Make her seem like the problem. "Carl," Brandon continued, his confidence rebuilding now that he'd found his angle, "I think you need to handle your employee. This is your establishment. You're responsible for what happens here. And right now, you've got a health code violation happening on your floor, and this woman is causing a scene." Carl's face did something complicated. Marcus watched him struggle, watched the war happening behind his eyes. Decency versus survival. Doing the right thing versus keeping the lights on. Survival won. "Emma," Carl said, and his voice had changed, gotten harder. "You need to take that animal and leave. Right now." Emma stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. "What?" "You heard me. You brought an unauthorized animal into the restaurant. That's a fireable offense. You're done. Get your things and go." The diner went completely silent. The kind of silence that feels like the whole world is holding its breath. "Carl," Emma said, her voice shaking, "he kicked me. He kicked Scout. You saw it. Everyone saw it. What I saw, Carl said, and Marcus could hear the lie forming even before the words came out, was you creating a disturbance, bringing an animal into a place that serves food, and causing a scene with customers. That's unacceptable. You're firing me. Emma's voice cracked on the last word. I've worked here for 3 years. I've never been late. I've covered every shift you've ever asked me to. I worked Christmas. I worked Thanksgiving. And you're firing me because I tried to save my dog's life? I'm firing you because you violated health codes and created a hostile environment for my customers, Carl said, the words rehearsed sounding now, like he was reading from a script written by a lawyer. I'm sorry, but I don't have a choice. You have every choice, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. You're choosing money over decency. You're choosing to protect 3 criminals because you're afraid of their father. Carl spun on him. This is none of your business. You're just a customer. Stay out of it. I became involved, Marcus said, taking one deliberate step toward Carl. The moment I watched 3 men assault someone, and you decided to punish the victim instead of calling the police. I don't have to call the police. No crime was committed. Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it around. The video played, clear as day, Brandon's foot connecting with Scout's small body. Emma's scream, Tyler and Josh joining in, laughing. No crime, Marcus repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. Carl's face went pale, but he'd committed now. He'd made his choice, and men like Carl, weak men who'd spent their lives bending to power, they doubled down when cornered. That video doesn't show the whole context, Carl said desperately. She was blocking the aisle. They were trying to move her. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, said a new voice. Everyone turned. Maggie Chen, an elderly woman who'd been sitting at table 3 eating her usual Tuesday pot roast, stood up. She was 76 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with white hair and the kind of fierce eyes that come from living through the Depression and raising 6 kids on a factory worker's salary. I saw the whole thing, Maggie said, her voice clear and strong. That girl was on the floor trying to save her puppy. Those 3 boys walked over and kicked them, for no reason, like it was funny. And you, she pointed at Carl with a trembling finger. You're a coward and a liar. Mrs. Chen, Carl started. Please don't. I've been coming to this diner for 23 years, Maggie continued, her voice getting louder. Since Ruby herself was alive, and she would be ashamed of you right now. Ashamed. A murmur of agreement rippled through the other diners. Marcus saw it spreading, saw the way people who'd been frozen were starting to find their courage in Maggie's example. Brandon felt it too, the room turning. He did what people like him always do when they feel control slipping. He pulled out the nuclear option. Carl, Brandon said, his voice dropping into something cold and businesslike. My father owns this building. In fact, he owns most of this block. I'm sure he'd be very interested to hear about how his tenants are treating his family. I'm sure he'd want to review all the lease agreements, make sure everything's up to code. You know how these old buildings are. Always something that needs fixing. Always some violation that could shut a place down. The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. Carl's shoulders slumped. He looked at Emma, and for just a second, Marcus saw genuine regret in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the dead-eyed look of a man who'd sold his soul and was trying to convince himself he got a good price. Emma, you need to leave. Now. Before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Emma looked around the diner, at the faces she'd served coffee to for 3 years, at the regulars she knew by name, at Maggie who'd just stood up for her. Then she looked down at Scout, who was breathing but barely, his small body so fragile in her arms. You're a coward, she said to Carl, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. And you, she turned to Brandon. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope when you look in the mirror tonight, you like what you see. I'll sleep just fine, Brandon said with a smirk. Unlike you, who's now unemployed. Good luck paying for that mutt's vet bills. Emma stood up slowly, cradling Scout against her chest. Her legs were shaking. Her back ached where Tyler had kicked her. But she stood tall, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Respect. This woman had just lost her job, had been assaulted, had been betrayed by a man she'd worked for, and she was walking out with her head up. She started toward the door, then stopped, turned back to Marcus, this stranger who'd stood up for her when no one else would. Thank you, she said quietly. For trying. Marcus nodded once. It's not over. Emma wanted to believe him, but she'd lived in Crescent Bay her whole life. She knew how power worked. She knew the Hartwell family was untouchable. She gave him a sad smile, the smile of someone who'd learned not to hope for too much, and walked out of Ruby's diner. The bell chimed as the door closed behind her. The sound felt final, like the ending of something. Brandon turned back to his booth, Tyler and Josh following, all three of them laughing now that the threat had passed, now that they'd won. Because they always won. That's what happened when your father owned the town. Marcus stood in the center of the diner for a moment longer. Then he walked back to the counter, picked up his jacket, and placed a $20 bill on the counter for his coffee. Carl, trying to restore some sense of normalcy, said, "Your bill was only $4. Keep it," Marcus said. "Consider it my final payment. I won't be coming back." "Now, hold on," Carl started, but Marcus was already walking toward the door. He stopped next to Brandon's booth. The three young men looked up at him, their faces flushed with victory, with the arrogance that comes from getting away with something. "You think this is over?" Marcus said quietly. "You think you won? You're wrong. By the end of the week, everyone in this town is going to know exactly what you are." Brandon laughed. "You're going to tell them? Go ahead. Who do you think they'll believe? My father, who employs half this town, or some random drifter?" Marcus smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd toppled terror cells and cartel operations, someone who'd dismantled networks of corruption in countries where corruption was the only law, the smile of someone who knew exactly what he was about to do. "How much does Richard Hartwell pay Carl to look the other way?" Marcus asked, his voice casual. The question landed like a grenade. Brandon's smirk faltered. Carl, behind the counter, went rigid. "What are you talking about?" Brandon said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Your father owns this building. He owns 43 commercial properties in this county, all bought in the last 6 years, all purchased through shell corporations, all mysteriously rezoned within months of purchase, all former small businesses that couldn't afford the new rent once he jacked the prices. And somehow, none of the building inspectors ever find violations in his properties. Somehow, the city council always approves his development plans. Somehow, when small business owners try to fight back, they find themselves facing code violations and lawsuits they can't afford." Marcus said it all in the same calm, conversational tone, but the information was specific, detailed, not the guesses of some random drifter. Brandon's face had gone from flushed to pale. "You've been looking into my father?" "I've been in this town for 2 weeks, Marcus said. "I've had a lot of time to read. Public records are fascinating. Property deeds, tax filings, campaign contributions, especially campaign contributions. Did you know your father is the single largest donor to Mayor Gibson's re-election campaign? Gave him $200,000. That buys a lot of favorable zoning decisions." The diner had gone quiet again, but this time it was different. People were listening. Really listening. "And you," Marcus turned to Tyler. "Your father is District Attorney Nathan Vance. Interesting how charges against the Hartwell family seem to disappear. Brandon had 3 assault complaints filed against him in the past 2 years. All dropped. All witnesses suddenly deciding not to cooperate. All case files sealed. That's quite a coincidence." Tyler's cocky grin had vanished completely. "And Josh Chen," Marcus continued, turning to the third member of the group. Your family runs Chen Construction, the same company that gets awarded every single major development contract in this county. The same company that somehow always has its permits approved within days, while everyone else waits months. Your father and Brandon's father are business partners. They buy properties together, force out the current tenants, then Chen Construction develops the land. It's a perfect little machine. Josh had stopped looking at Marcus. He was staring at his hands. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice never rising above that deadly calm. I'm going to leave here. I'm going to go to my truck. I'm going to make some phone calls to some friends of mine, friends who work for the FBI, friends who specialize in public corruption cases, and I'm going to send them every piece of documentation I've compiled over the past 2 weeks. Tax records, property transfers, campaign finance reports, complaints that were buried, and this video of you 3 assaulting an innocent woman. He held up his phone, the screen showing the paused image of Brandon's foot connecting with Scout. And then, Marcus continued, I'm going to send this video to every news outlet in California, to social media, to every college you applied to, every company you've ever interviewed with, every organization your family is involved with. Everyone is going to see it. Everyone is going to know what you did. And more importantly, everyone is going to start asking questions about why charges weren't filed, about why the DA's son was involved, about why this keeps happening. And once people start asking questions, once federal investigators start digging, your whole corrupt little empire is going to come apart. The silence in the diner was absolute. Brandon stood up, trying to recover, trying to find the anger that had always served him. You're bluffing. You're nobody. I'm Sergeant Major Marcus Webb, Marcus said quietly. 20 years, Army Special Operations, Delta Force. I've taken down terrorist networks in 6 countries. I've dismantled cartel operations that make your father's little real estate scheme look like a lemonade stand. I know exactly how to pull apart organizations like yours. I know how to find the weak links, how to flip witnesses, how to build cases that put people in federal prison. And the best part? I've got nothing but time, no job, no family, nothing to do but make this my full-time mission. So when I say I'm going to end you, I don't mean I'm going to try. I mean it's already done. You're just too stupid to realize you're already finished. He pulled out his wallet, removed a business card, and placed it on the table in front of Brandon. That's the number for a good lawyer. You're going to need one. Marcus turned and walked toward the door. The entire diner watched him go. The bell chimed as he stepped out into the bright California afternoon, and this time it didn't sound final. It sounded like a beginning. Marcus walked to his truck, parked 2 blocks down on Main Street. It was an old Ford F-250, dark green, practical, the kind of vehicle that didn't draw attention. He climbed in, closed the door, and sat for a moment in the quiet. Then he pulled out his phone and made the first call. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. Reeves. Sarah, it's Webb. There was a pause, then a warm laugh. Marcus Webb. I heard you finally retired. Figured you'd be fishing in Montana or something. Don't tell me you're already bored. Colonel Sarah Reeves had been Army JAG, Judge Advocate General, military lawyer. Marcus had saved her life in Fallujah in 2004 when their convoy was ambushed. She'd gone on to become one of the most effective military prosecutors in the Army, putting away war criminals and corrupt contractors with equal efficiency. Now she ran a legal aid clinic in Sacramento, taking on cases that bigger firms wouldn't touch. I need your help, Marcus said. I've got a corruption case, local level, but deep. Real estate scam, bribery, abuse of power, and it just turned personal. How personal? Watched 3 rich kids assault a woman for trying to save her dying puppy. Their fathers are the local DA, a real estate mogul, and a construction company owner. They're running a machine, buying properties, forcing out tenants, flipping land for massive profits, using the legal system to protect themselves. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You have evidence? 2 weeks' worth. Documentation, financial records, and video of the assault. But the victim just got fired from her job for fighting back. She's scared, broke, and probably thinks she's alone. Where are you? Crescent Bay, California. About 2 hours north of Sacramento. I'll be there by 5. Send me everything you have. And Marcus? Yeah, it's good to hear from you. Even if it is because you've gone and adopted another stray. Marcus smiled despite himself. Always was a sucker for the underdog. He ended the call and immediately made another. This one rang 6 times before it was answered by a voice that sounded like it had been dragged through gravel. Park. David. It's Marcus Webb. A sharp intake of breath. Sarge? Jesus, I thought you were dead. Or as good as. Heard you'd gone dark after retirement. David Park had been an embedded journalist with Delta Force in Afghanistan. Marcus had pulled him out of a Taliban ambush that should have killed him. Since then, Park had become one of the most respected investigative journalists on the West Coast, writing exposés for outlets like ProPublica and the Los Angeles Times, until he'd written a piece on defense contractor corruption that had cost him his job. Now he freelanced, chasing stories that bigger publications were too afraid to touch. I need you, Marcus said. I've got a story. Public corruption, real estate fraud, assault on video, it's all connected. Father-son operation with the local DA providing protection. Where? Crescent Bay. Park laughed, bitter and knowing. The Hartwell machine. I've been trying to nail that story for 2 years. Nobody will talk. Everyone's too scared. What do you have that I don't? Video evidence, financial records, and a victim willing to testify if we can protect her. Can we protect her? I've got Colonel Reeves from JAG coming down, and I'm calling you. Between the 3 of us, we've got legal firepower, media pressure, and me. They've never faced people like us. They don't know how to fight this fight. Send me everything. I'll start writing tonight. This is going to be national, Marcus. This is the kind of story that ends careers. Good, Marcus said, and meant it. He made 3 more calls, one to a retired cop who'd been forced out of Crescent Bay PD for trying to investigate the Hartwells and now ran a private security firm. One to a forensic accountant who specialized in tracking money through shell corporations, and one to an old Delta Force buddy who now worked in the FBI's white-collar crime division. By the time he finished, the sun had moved in the sky. It was just past 2 in the afternoon. Marcus looked at his phone, at the list of people he'd just set in motion, and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Purpose. But there was one more call to make. The most important one. He scrolled through the contacts in his phone until he found what he needed. Public records. The county clerk's office had a website, and Emma Torres had filled out a business license application last year for a side business, pet sitting. The address was listed. Marcus started the truck and pulled out into traffic, heading toward the old residential neighborhood on the east side of town. He was going to find Emma Torres, and he was going to make her a promise that she was not alone, that this was not over, that 3 spoiled rich kids and their corrupt fathers were about to learn what happens when you hurt the wrong person in front of the wrong man. Marcus Webb had spent 20 years fighting enemies of the United States in deserts and mountains halfway around the world. Now he was bringing that fight home, and God help anyone who stood in his way. Emma Torres lived in a place that couldn't quite decide if it was an apartment or just a box with plumbing. The building was a 3-story walk-up on Sycamore Street, the kind of structure that had been considered modern in 1973 and had been declining ever since. The tan paint was peeling in long strips, exposing the gray concrete underneath. The front door didn't lock properly. The hallway smelled like old carpet and someone's failed experiment with curry. Emma's apartment was number 2C, 2nd floor, end of the hall, 450 square feet that cost her $900 a month, which was technically affordable by California standards, which meant it was absolutely crushing her. She sat on her futon couch that doubled as her bed, still wearing her coffee-stained work uniform, Scout wrapped in a towel on her lap. The puppy was breathing, shallow but steady. His fever had broken sometime during the walk home, and Emma had sat in her tiny bathroom running cool water over his small body until he'd finally stopped trembling. Now she just held him, and tried not to think about what had just happened. She'd been fired, in front of everyone. After 3 years of perfect attendance, of covering shifts, of smiling through every rude customer and every impossible order, she'd been fired for trying to save a life. Emma's phone sat on the scratched coffee table in front of her. She'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, trying to work up the courage to make the calls she needed to make. Call her student loan company, ask for a deferment. Call her landlord, beg for an extension on rent. Call the community college, drop her classes because she couldn't afford them anymore. Call the animal shelter and ask about surrender procedures. That last thought made her throat close up. She looked down at Scout, at his little face, at the way his paws twitched in his sleep like he was running through dreams that were better than his reality. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Her savings account had $47 in it. Her checking account had 19. She was supposed to get paid on Friday, but now there'd be no paycheck. Just whatever Carl decided to include in her final payment, if he was even legally required to pay her for the partial week. The vet had given her a bill for the emergency visit last night. $640 for the exam, the IV fluids, the antibiotics. She'd put it on her credit card, the one with the 23% interest rate, and now she was maxed out. Scout needed follow-up care, more medicine, maybe more fluids if he relapsed. She did the math in her head, and the numbers didn't work. They just didn't work. The animal shelter was open until 6. She could call right now. They'd take him. They'd treat him. He'd have a chance at a good home with a family that could actually afford to care for him properly. A family that wouldn't get him hurt. A family that wouldn't. Emma was crying again. She'd thought she was done crying, but apparently there was an endless reservoir of tears somewhere inside her chest. There was a knock at her door. Emma froze. Her landlord. It had to be her landlord. Someone from the diner had probably already called him, told him Emma Torres was trouble, told him she'd been fired for cause. He was here to tell her to be out by the end of the month, or worse, by the end of the week. The knock came again, firmer this time, patient but insistent. Emma carefully set Scout down on the futon, surrounding him with pillows so he wouldn't roll off, and walked to the door. She didn't have a peephole. Another thing that should have been standard but wasn't. She cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock engaged. Marcus Webb stood in the hallway. For a moment, Emma couldn't process it. The man from the diner, the stranger who'd stood up to Brandon Hartwell, was standing outside her apartment. He'd somehow found her address. He was here. "Miss Torres," Marcus said, his voice the same calm, measured tone from the diner. "My name is Marcus Webb. We need to talk." Emma's first instinct was fear. She didn't know this man. He'd been kind to her at the diner, but she'd learned a long time ago that men who seemed kind weren't always kind. That protection could turn into something else very quickly. Marcus seemed to sense her hesitation. He took a half step back, putting more distance between himself and the door, creating space, making himself less threatening. "I know this is strange," he said. "I know you don't know me, but I have information you need to hear. About what happened today. About the Hartwell family. About what we can do about it." "We?" Emma's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I've made some calls. I have people coming. Lawyers, journalists, people who can help. But I need to talk to you first. I need to know if you're willing to fight back." Emma stared at him through the gap in the door. Fight back? The words sounded impossible. People like her didn't fight back against people like the Hartwells. That's not how the world worked. "I can't," she said quietly. "I can't afford lawyers. I can't afford anything. I just lost my job. I can't—" "The lawyers are free," Marcus interrupted gently. "They're friends of mine. They owe me favors. This won't cost you anything except your time and your testimony." Emma wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But nothing in her life had ever been free. Everything had a cost, and she'd learned to be suspicious of people who said otherwise. "Why?" she asked. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. This isn't your problem. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, and Emma heard something in it that sounded almost like pain. 20 years ago, I took an oath, he said, to defend people who couldn't defend themselves, to stand up against injustice wherever I found it. I spent 2 decades doing that in other countries, in places most people have never heard of. Then I came home, and I thought I was done. I thought I could just exist, drink coffee, watch sunsets, be a civilian. He looked directly at Emma through that crack in the door, and his eyes were intensely blue, and sad, and determined all at once. But today I watched 3 men hurt you and a defenseless animal, and I watched everyone else just let it happen. I watched your boss fire you for being the victim, and I realized something. The fight doesn't end just because you come home. Evil is evil, whether it's wearing a uniform in Kandahar or expensive clothes in a California diner. And I can't walk away from it. I don't know how to walk away from it. Emma felt something crack in her chest, some wall she'd built to protect herself. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, Marcus said. You should be. These are powerful people. They're going to fight back. They're going to try to destroy your credibility, make you look crazy, make you the villain. But here's what they don't know. They're not fighting you. They're fighting me. And I'm very, very good at this. There was no arrogance in the way he said it, just fact. The statement of a professional discussing his area of expertise. Emma's hand went to the chain lock. She hesitated one more moment. Then she slid it free and opened the door. Marcus didn't move, didn't step forward, just waited for her to invite him in. That small gesture of respect, of understanding boundaries, made Emma's decision feel right. Come in, she said. Marcus Webb stepped into Emma Torres's tiny apartment and carefully closed the door behind him. His eyes did a quick tactical scan of the space, one room serving as bedroom, living room, and office. A kitchenette so small you couldn't open the oven and the refrigerator at the same time. A bathroom that he couldn't see but could guess was about the size of a closet. One window, facing the building next door, barely letting in any light. This woman had been living on the absolute edge, one emergency away from catastrophe. And today, the emergency had come. His eyes found Scout on the futon, still wrapped in the towel, sleeping. The puppy looked impossibly small in the dim light. How is he? Marcus asked. Better, I think. His fever broke. He's breathing okay. Emma's voice trembled. But he needs more treatment, more medicine, and I don't. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Marcus pulled out his phone. What's your vet's name? What? The emergency vet clinic where you took him last night. What's it called? Crescent Bay Animal Hospital. But I can't afford. Marcus was already dialing. He held up a finger, asking her to wait. The call connected. Yes, this is Marcus Webb. I need to speak to the billing department. Yes, I'll hold. He covered the phone's microphone and looked at Emma. What's your last name? Torres. But you can't just... Billing? Yes. I have an outstanding bill for Emma Torres. Treatment for a puppy. Parvovirus. Yes, that's the one. I'd like to pay that bill in full, and I'd like to set up a credit for any future treatment the animal needs. Credit card. He rattled off a number from memory. Authorization code is on the back. Yes, I'll hold. Emma stood frozen in the middle of her tiny apartment, watching this stranger pay off her vet bill like it was nothing, like $640 was pocket change. Why are you doing this? She asked again, her voice breaking. Marcus looked at her while waiting for the transaction to process. Because someone has to. And I can. Yes, I'm here. Perfect. Thank you. He ended the call and pocketed his phone. You're covered. All previous charges paid. $5,000 credit on the account for future care. That should be more than enough to get him through this. Emma sat down hard on the futon, like her legs had just stopped working. I can't accept this. I can't pay you back. I don't have anything. I'm not asking you to pay me back, Marcus said. He pulled out the only chair in the apartment, a folding metal thing by the tiny kitchen table, and sat down across from her. I'm asking you to tell your story. When the lawyers get here, when the journalists start asking questions, I need you to tell the truth about what happened. That's the payment. Your truth. Emma looked down at her hands. They were shaking. And if I do that, what happens? Brandon's father is rich. Tyler's father is the DA. They'll destroy me. They'll make me look like I'm crazy, like I'm a criminal. They'll try, Marcus interrupted. But they won't succeed, because we're not going to let them. Emma, I need you to understand something. These men, the Hartwells, the Vances, the Chens, they've built their power on one single thing: fear. They scare people into silence. They make you think they're untouchable, but they're not. They're just bullies with money. And bullies, no matter how rich they are, they're all the same. They fold the moment someone stands up to them. You don't know that, Emma said quietly. Yes, I do. I've spent 20 years fighting people who are actually untouchable. Warlords with armies, cartel bosses with governments in their pocket, terror networks with cells in 30 countries. I've taken them all down. And you know what I learned? Power is an illusion. It only exists as long as people believe in it. The moment you stop being afraid, the moment you stand up and say no, the illusion breaks, and they have nothing. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on hers. Here's what's going to happen in the next 48 hours. A lawyer named Sarah Reeves is driving down from Sacramento. She's Army JAG, one of the best military prosecutors in the country. She's going to take your case pro bono. A journalist named David Park is researching the story right now. He's going to write an article that gets published in every major outlet in California. I have a forensic accountant looking into Richard Hartwell's finances. I have an FBI agent reviewing the evidence for potential federal charges. And I have a retired cop who's going to provide security for you. Emma's head was spinning. Security? Once this story breaks, once we go public, they're going to come after you. Not physically, probably, but legally. Harassment, intimidation. They'll try to scare you into dropping everything. The security is to make sure you feel safe, to make sure they know you're protected. This is insane, Emma whispered. You're talking about going to war with the most powerful family in the county. Yes, Marcus said simply. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Are you in? Emma looked at Scout, sleeping peacefully now, his little chest rising and falling. She thought about Brandon's foot, connecting with his small body. She thought about the laughter. She thought about Carl firing her, choosing money over decency. She thought about every time in her life someone with power had stepped on her, and she'd just taken it because that's what you did when you were poor. You took it. You survived. You didn't fight back. But maybe it was time to stop surviving and start fighting. I'm in, she said, her voice stronger now. Tell me what you need me to do. Marcus smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and proud. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Every interaction you had with those three. Every word. Every detail. We're going to build a case that's so airtight they can't wriggle out of it. For the next hour, Emma talked. Marcus recorded everything on his phone, asking clarifying questions, making sure he had every detail correct. Brandon snapping his fingers at her. Tyler recording on his phone. Josh's cruel laughter. The kick. Carl's betrayal. All of it. When she was done, Marcus had 14 pages of notes and 43 minutes of recorded testimony. This is good, he said, reviewing his notes. This is really good, but we need more. We need the pattern, the history. These kids have done this before. Brandon has complaints filed against him. I need to find those other victims and convince them to come forward. They won't talk, Emma said. Everyone's too scared. They were too scared because they were alone. But if 5 people come forward together, if there's a lawyer protecting them and the FBI investigating, it's not scary anymore. It's safe. Strength in numbers. There was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. Professional. Expected. Marcus stood. That'll be Sarah. He opened the door, and Emma got her first look at Colonel Sarah Reeves. She was in her mid-40s, tall and lean, with dark hair cut in a practical bob, and the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing you were doing it. She wore jeans and a blazer, carrying a leather messenger bag that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. "Marcus," Sarah said, stepping inside. She looked around the apartment, her sharp eyes taking in everything, then landing on Emma. Her expression softened. "You must be Emma. I'm Sarah Reeves. Marcus tells me you've had the worst day of your life." Emma let out a surprised laugh that was half sob. "That's one way to put it." Sarah set her bag down on the table and pulled out a yellow legal pad and 3 different colored pens. She was the kind of person who came prepared. "All right," Sarah said, sitting down and clicking a pen. "Let's get to work. Emma, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Some of them are going to be uncomfortable. Some of them are going to make you relive trauma, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that?" Emma nodded. For the next 2 hours, Sarah Reeves took Emma through her statement 3 times, each time digging deeper, finding inconsistencies, clarifying details, building a narrative that would hold up in court. She explained the legal strategy, the charges they could file, the civil suit for wrongful termination and assault. "Here's the hard truth," Sarah said, setting down her pen and looking at Emma directly. "Criminal charges are going to be difficult. The DA is Tyler Vance's father. He's not going to prosecute his own son or his business partner's son. We'll need to go federal, and that takes time. But the civil suit? That we can file immediately. Wrongful termination against Carl and the diner. Assault and battery against all 3 of them. We're talking damages that could run into 6 figures. I don't want money," Emma said quietly. "I want them to face consequences. I want people to know what they did." "The money is the consequence," Sarah said. "For people like the Hartwells, the only thing they respect is financial pain. We sue them for everything they've got. We make this so expensive that even their wealth starts to feel the pinch. And more importantly, we make it public. Every filing is a public record. Every court appearance is open to the media. We turn this into a spectacle they can't hide from." There was another knock at the door. This time it was David Park. The journalist was in his late 30s, Korean-American, with tired eyes and the kind of rumpled appearance that suggested he'd been wearing the same clothes for 2 days straight. He probably had been. When a story had him, David Park didn't sleep. "Emma Torres?" he said, extending a hand. "David Park, I've been trying to nail the Hartwell story for 2 years. You just handed me the smoking gun." He pulled out his laptop and showed Emma what he'd found in just the past few hours of research. The pattern was undeniable. Richard Hartwell had acquired 43 commercial properties in Crescent Bay over the past 6 years. Every single one had been purchased through a shell corporation with a generic name, Vista Holdings LLC, Coastal Properties Incorporated Pacific Development Group. "Shell corporations aren't illegal," David explained, "but they're a red flag. They're used to hide the identity of the real owner. And look at this." He pulled up a series of property records showing the dates of purchase and the dates of rezoning approvals. Every property was rezoned within 4 months of Hartwell buying it. Every single one. The average rezoning process in California takes 18 to 24 months, but somehow Hartwell's properties get approved in 4 months. How? Because he donated $200,000 to Mayor Gibson's campaign, and another $150,000 to the city council races of the 3 members who sit on the planning commission. Emma stared at the screen. "That's bribery. Technically, it's campaign contributions," David said with a bitter smile. "Perfectly legal. But morally? Yeah, it's bribery. And here's where it gets really interesting." He pulled up another document. Court records. "Brandon Hartwell has been charged with assault 3 times, assault and battery twice, 1 DUI, 1 reckless driving. Tyler Vance has 2 assault charges and 1 sexual assault allegation from his time at UC Santa Barbara. Josh Chen has 1 assault charge. Every single case was dropped. Every single witness withdrew their complaint. Every single time, DA Nathan Vance's office found insufficient evidence to proceed. Because Tyler's father is the DA, Emma said, understanding dawning. Exactly. He protects his son and his business partner's kids. It's a machine. Hartwell buys properties. The city council rezones them. Chen Construction develops them. And Vance makes sure no legal problems interfere. They've made hundreds of millions of dollars, and anyone who gets in their way gets crushed. He looked at Emma with something like awe. Until you're the first person who's stood up to them and survived long enough to talk about it. You're the crack in the armor. And I'm going to make sure everyone sees it. Marcus, who'd been standing by the window watching the street, spoke up. How fast can you write this? I can have a draft done by midnight, David said. But I need more than just Emma's story. I need corroboration. I need other victims willing to go on record. I'm working on that, Marcus said. He pulled out his phone and showed them a list of names. These are the people who filed complaints against Brandon or his friends. Complaints that were dropped. I'm going to find every single one of them. Sarah looked at the list and nodded approvingly. If we can get even 2 more people to come forward, we have a pattern. That's when this becomes a story about systemic corruption, not just one bad incident. Emma watched these 3 people, these strangers who'd walked into her life just hours ago, dismantle the power structure of an entire town on her kitchen table. She felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Hope. There's a girl, Emma said suddenly. From the diner, Chloe something. She worked there about 2 years ago. She left really suddenly. There were rumors that Brandon had done something to her, but no one talked about it. She might talk now. Marcus made a note. Last name? I don't remember, but Carl would have it in the employee records. I'll get it, Marcus said, and Emma believed him. They worked until almost midnight. Sarah drafted legal complaints. David wrote his article. Marcus made phone calls, tracking down witnesses, building his network. Emma sat in the middle of it all, providing details, answering questions, slowly understanding that she wasn't just a victim anymore. She was the key to bringing down an empire. When they finally left, Sarah promising to file the lawsuits first thing in the morning, and David promising the article would be published by tomorrow afternoon, Emma was alone again in her tiny apartment. But it didn't feel tiny anymore. It felt like a war room. She looked at Scout, who'd woken up during the meeting and was now sitting up, looking at her with those bright puppy eyes. His tail wagged weakly. We're going to win, Emma whispered to him, scratching behind his ears. I don't know how yet, but we're going to win. Outside her window, Marcus Webb sat in his truck, watching the building. He'd stay there all night, just in case, just to make sure, because wars weren't won in a single battle, and this war was just beginning.